To Replenish, hope that sustains in the midst of adversity. This is a safe place where I will invite special guests to share encouragement and insight to replenish us on the journey of raising kids from hard places. So whether you're adoptive, kinship, foster, or safe family, this conversation is for you. So like I said, the chat room's open. Feel free as we're having this conversation, Brandi and I, to ask questions. We'll be reading that. So I've invited Brandi Lea. She is joining us for a conversation about self-love and giving ourselves voice. And before I introduce her, let me tell you why she's so amazing. So Brandi, has 3 kids, 2 bio and 1 adopted. They're 14, 14, and 15. So she's a teen mom. And she also has 38 kiddos in Uganda who call her mom. She recently married a precious man who's taking on the mantle of dad to all of her kids too. She is the founder of Beauty for Ashes Uganda, which helps bring long-term sustainable development for over 1,000 Ugandan mamas. And she also runs Soul Care, a retreat ministry for women leaders of nonprofits, and she is passionate about deep healing, justice, and taking care of both the victims of injustice as well as those that serve them. Brandi walks with victims of injustice through their healing journey, and she's also co-authored an ebook about healing prayer. So welcome.
Well, thank you.
We're so
that was
glad.
actually written a while ago, and now I have 47 kids in Uganda. So
wow.
We're at an even 50, including our U.S. kids.
Oh my gosh. So tell everybody, because they're probably going, huh? Tell everybody, like, just what does that mean?
Oh, right. It's real confusing, right? So we work in Uganda. It's called Beauty for Ashes Uganda, and we work in rural Uganda in the north. And we mainly work with single moms and widows. So what our goal is to work towards healing and long-term sustainability. And so that takes place through women's cooperatives. So we put women in groups of 30 and they meet weekly to encourage and empower each other and then to pool their own resources. So they're giving each other loans and things like that. And then we have literacy classes. So our moms are learning reading, writing, basic math, sanitation, hygiene, nutrition, agriculture, and business. And then we have a school fees program and emergency medical care and clean water projects. So we have 1,230 mamas. So that's our real heart. And a lot of that stemmed from adoption, because in 2007, I came home with our sweet man, Davis. He was 2.5 at the time, and he's from Liberia. And I read his story, and I met his sweet, precious biological mama, and it impacted me that moms were going through this all over the world, and that women were having to find another home for their kids because of poverty and because of illiteracy. And so now I get to work with moms around the world. And so we have 1,230 mamas in our program so that they can help each other and raise their own communities, and our lives are transformed by them and their lives. And then through the process, we have met 47 kiddos who've lost both of their parents. And so some of those were our moms that were in our program, and maybe mama died for a number of different reasons, and there just wasn't a family ready to step in to really take them on as their kids. But our staff, we have an all Ugandan staff, and our staff were able to find families. And so we kind of do like a quasi foster care type idea where they're in a lot of kinship placements and then going to boarding school, and then we take care of them 100%. But in most of these cases, even the people that said that the kiddos could live with them weren't really ready to be mom. And so I offer my mama heart to them, as well as my Ugandan field director, Rita. So now they have 2 moms. And so those are my babies. So every time we have a new kiddo who comes into our program, we basically tell them, here's the deal. Like, I'm sorry you're here because it really sucks, everything that brought you to this moment. Um, and I'm going to love you like a mama, and you can call me whatever you want. Like, I can just be the, auntie or, sugar mama. It's just paying for them to go to school if they're a little older, or whatever it is. But I'm going to choose to love you like a mama. So it's a lot like foster care in some ways. But so those are our babies. And they have told me, like, when you go back to the U.S., how many kids do you say you have? And I said, well, I usually just look at people awkwardly. And I'm like, 50. So they like when I'm awkward, and I love them so much. So that's how I have 50 kids.
I love that. I love that they want you to acknowledge them even when you're here. So, that's special.
I think so too. And I think that it's always that awkwardness, right? I know a lot of foster moms and people, all of us, we struggle with that idea. Like, do I say I'm your mom? Do I not say I'm your mom? Like, what feels safest to you? And as I've walked with so many people across the world who've been in a position of not having someone who claimed them as daughter or son, that has over and over been communicated to me that feels important. And so that's why I tell them, I'm going to claim you.
Right.
And you can choose whether or not you claim me. That's totally up to you and whatever is best for your soul. But as for me, you're stuck with me.
Well, everybody wants to know that they're wanted, right? Everybody wants to feel wanted. So I love that. And then, so your other nonprofit is Soul Care. And, you can tell us a little bit about that nonprofit, but, also what we wanted to talk about was the topic of soul care. So if you want to just tell us a little bit about what that nonprofit is, and we'll go from there.
So our other project is that we do retreats for nonprofit leaders so that we can pour into them like they pour into people around the world. And so I take 8 women at a time who fight human trafficking, global poverty, and domestic issues. And we take them away to remind them of their belovedness. And really all of that started, so it actually started because Jesus told me I was a hypocrite. That was a fun conversation. Because I became really good at expressing belovedness to others. And it didn't matter their story. It didn't matter what had happened or what was currently happening. Like, I just wanted to look people in the eyes and say, you are loved and you are worth loving. And the Lord in his goodness said, hey, P.S., you don't actually believe that about yourself. And how can you communicate belovedness if you don't truly believe it? So I called my therapist, right? First call. I was like, I need to get back on your books and we've got some work to do. And began doing some really deep work. And in the process, I realized that there are a lot of leaders within churches, within nonprofits. I found it a ton within foster and adoptive care, that we're really great at communicating belovedness, but we're not really great at living it out. And a lot of the things, we do trauma-informed care, and we're learning about how do we do this and how do we speak to someone's heart. And yet, do we apply those same principles to us? And am I doing that on a daily basis? Am I believing the truth, and then am I actually living the truth of my own belovedness so that I can clearly communicate? Because if there's one thing survivors of anything have, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong here, but they have a lie detector. I was trying to figure out a good way to say that without cursing. Like a BS meter that, like, they can tell if you're not living up to what you say. And so if I really want to be somebody who communicates belovedness, who communicates healing in a hurting world, then I best believe it about myself. So
I love that. And I love this topic because that's exactly what I have experienced myself. As I was having a hard time following through on trust-based relational intervention. And what I came to realize was I came to a place where, yes, I believed that, but I wasn't actually doing it on myself. So I wasn't giving myself voice. I wasn't giving myself the grace and the compassion. And I wasn't requiring all the things that I was requiring my son to do. I wasn't requiring them of myself. And I wasn't acknowledging, like, this is a hard struggle. It's hard for me to stay regulated, but yet I'm expecting him to. And it's hard for me to give myself grace, yet I'm expecting him to. But once I came to that place, like you're saying, of like, hey, I need to apply this stuff to myself, not just say it, it opened up a whole new world to me, because then I understood what it meant when people said, you can't take your kid where you haven't gone yourself. And it really has been transformational for my whole family.
Right. Me too, that we cannot lead where we have not been. And I also believe that God is trauma informed with us.
For sure.
Right. And so how can I do that with my kid or with even like random strangers if I don't recognize that God feels that same way about me? And that he sees maybe past the anger to the sadness, or past the behavior to the heart. And he's asking for my eyes, right? So that I might know my belovedness.
Right. Yeah.
And especially like this week, right, you guys? I feel like this conversation is maybe extra needed this week when it's getting real, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a hard season. It's a hard season to begin with. When I first invited you onto the show, I thought, great, let's talk about soul care. Let's talk about how do we take care of ourselves in the midst of this COVID crisis, stay at home, we're having a hard time. But now, like, it's an added level, with all of the just protesting and the rioting and the George, Floyd's death and the anger and frustration, like all of that conversation happening on top of what was already hard is hard. Like, it's hard for me to even put into words what is happening, because it's so overwhelming. There's so many levels. So I think it's perfect timing that you're on here now and can just add to the conversation of how to, I guess, even give voice to what's happening now, and how important it is for us to give voice to ourselves, and frankly now, like, to others who have for so long been voiceless, and maybe we have not. I know I have not been the best at giving voice to the voiceless. So I feel like this is partly our opportunity to be able to speak positivity into the conversation, and as well as, grieve and ask for forgiveness, and just be, I guess, kind of humble and honest and transparent about it.
Yeah, I mean, we had this conversation set up, and then Tristan texted me earlier and was like, okay, so we've got to address to what's going on this week, because it doesn't even feel like we can move past that, right? Like, we can't just jump into other conversations when there is this heaviness. And can we switch the video so that I can see everyone's videos? Is that okay? Can I do gallery view? Oh, look, I can just do it on my own phone or on my own computer. I don't know if anybody has their videos, but you guys, are you feeling heavy this week?
Feel free to chat in the chat room.
Yeah, chat in the chat room. That like, who feels just the heaviness? I am. I feel like I have cried before 8 a.m. every day this week. I also feel like I've been more angry than I've ever been in my life. And I don't do anger. Like, that's not a comfortable emotion for me. How many of you guys are raising kids of color?
Mm-hmm.
It's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
It's so scary. And we want, I like to see some kids in some of those videos. That's super fun. It's heavy. It's scary. It's maddening. And I don't know about each of you and where you are on your journey, even about understanding this or listening, but it is a time to lean in and to listen. And what we're hearing is breaking our hearts. I just read the book, The New Jim Crow, last week. I don't know if you guys have read that, but oh my dear, I feel like everything I knew is kind of coming apart. And I'm working my way through Waking Up White right now, which I super suggest, you guys, if you're looking for a great starter book to understand, download Waking Up White. They have discussion questions that you can do. You could do it as a book club, but what I'm seeing over and over again is I almost have a hard time about talking about anything else. Like, I have a hard time being normal right now. We have friends over, and I don't know if you guys are experiencing this too, but we have friends over and they like want to talk about other things. I'm like, I'm out. Like, I've got nothing to give because this is weighing so heavy. And what it seems like as we look around is that all of us are basically in our trauma brain, right? Like, yes, that it's true for our kids, but it is true for all of us. We're feeling, I don't know about you guys, are you having a hard time sleeping?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. I've woken up with a headache, a migraine every single day for the last week. I also haven't really been eating. For me, it could go either way, right? Like, either I'm eating everything in sight, or sometimes when I'm in my trauma brain, my body is so busy doing other things that I can't digest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm finding myself anxious, having a hard time breathing. Like, I've got all the symptoms of being, you know, what all of the experts call amygdala hijacked. You guys have heard that, I'm sure, with lots of other experts. But I feel those symptoms. And so I'm needing to practice it all with myself. I'm needing to practice trauma-informed care with me, with the people on Facebook, recognizing like, okay, so other people are traumatized as well right now. How do I respond gently? How do I respond? What do I do here? How do I grieve? How do I listen? And so much of soul care and self-care is about just paying attention. It's about paying attention to ourselves. It's about paying attention to our bodies so that we might lead the way in health. So my favorite scripture is in Isaiah. It talks about, and you guys aren't going to be surprised because you heard what the name of our nonprofit was, Beauty for Ashes. You guys know where I'm going with this? Okay, so we all love it, right? Like, God says, I will give you a crown of beauty instead of ashes. Are you with me? The oil of joy instead of mourning.
Dancing.
Garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair, right? Mm-hmm. All of it, and we are in. We are loving it. We are like, yes, yes, yes. Give me that, give me that, give me that. And then it goes on, which I love. Oh, look, my daughter just came and brought me a drink. Thank you so much. In my bathroom. I'm so sorry that I have kids asking me questions in the middle of this. So all of that is beautiful. And then it goes on and it says, and they will be planted, oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And they will rebuild the ancient ruins. They will restore the places long devastated. They will renew the places that have been devastated for generations. And you guys, what I keep going back to over and over and over again is if we want to be renewers, rebuilders, and restorers in a broken world, we have a plan right here within the scripture. And as I look around at the world right now, like it feels like it's just the apocalypse. Like, obviously, maybe I should have been paying more attention to those Left Behind books because something's going on right now. My friend in El Salvador called, which, you know, it's just crazy pants there and martial law, and there was a tropical storm, and then they had an earthquake. So they've had flooding and an earthquake this week. And she said, well, at least the good news is I'm winning an apocalypse bingo. But that's how it feels, right? Everything is burning down around us. And what I believe is our calling as believers is to be restorers, renewers, and rebuilders in this broken world. And to do that, the people who get to do that are those who received beauty for their ashes, right? They will rebuild the ancient ruins. The they is those who had ashes, those who had despair. And too often, we just want to have the answers. We just want to like show up at the scene of the destroyed places and do something without recognizing that what qualifies us to be restorers, rebuilders, and renewers in a broken world is to be the ones who have received beauty from our ashes, is to be the ones who have received the garment of praise and the oil of joy instead of mourning. And for too long, we've been ignoring our ashes. We've been ignoring our mourning. We've been ignoring our despair because we thought like that wasn't Christ-like enough, right? I got to just put on a pretty face. I've got to just be thankful. I've got to just choose something instead of diving deep into pain and finding healing there. And I think that's what we mean when we talk about, like, we've got to give a voice to it. Brene Brown, who is brilliant, right? Like, I honestly feel like she may be the Solomon of today in her level of wisdom. If you guys haven't heard of Brene Brown, everybody go out and buy her books. And she just started a podcast, which I feel like is just for such a time as this. Back to my goal in life, in case you were wondering, is to be what the love child of Brene Brown and Jimmy Fallon would be like. Right? Super deep and super ridiculous all at the same time. I think I'm well on my way. But Brene tells us that you cannot selectively numb.
Right.
So if we numb to the hard, we numb to the good. And so what does that mean for us in our calling to be healers in this world? Oh, Perry just asked, what is the name of her book? She has a ton of books. Oh, look. Way to go, Max.
Way to go.
There's her TED Talk. You can also start with her books, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, everything. Everything she has written and done is brilliant. But if that is our task, to be healers in this broken world, it has to start here. We have to be we have to be the guinea pig, right? Just like with our kids, if we're going to lead in healing, we have to heal.
And I love that. And so I have a question for you. So if we're stuck in our trauma brains and we're stuck, like I put, the flight, fight, or freeze on there because I feel like, that's kind of in general people's responses. Yeah. And I feel like that's their responses now. Mm-hmm. That's tends to be your response inside your family. You either fight back, you either get mad and angry, you either take off, like check out and say, I'm not going there, or you just freeze, like you just are kind of dumbfounded. You're physically present, but you can't engage because your brain is being hijacked. So
Right.
I think, like, how do you move forward with each of those things? How do you, if that's where you're at, how do you move forward to saying, I'm going to allow myself to feel this pain? How do you, whatever that pain is? I actually met someone this week, a salesman, and I was talking to him, and he's a young guy, and I just instantly, I don't know why, but God pulled my heart towards him. And he's got quite the story. He's adopted, was in foster care, was in our local group home, Orangewood. And he said that he knows he needs to get therapy, but life is good right now. Life is good, and he doesn't want to go there because he's not sure of where that's going to take him. And we all know, who've been in therapy, that you're raw at the surface when you go there, and it is kind of hard, and it is ugly, and life can get rough for a season before you get to that freedom. So how do we allow ourselves to take that risk of going to the ugly place and getting outside of that fight, flight, or freeze?
Yeah, I think we probably have two groups of people right now. We have people who are like feeling all of the feelings.
Right.
And they're like, oh, sweet Jesus, I am raw. Like, I just feel like I've been filleted. I do not know what to do. And then we have people who are afraid to be those people.
Right.
Right? That we're stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. We're a little bit numb. We're like, okay, I know I want to feel, but no, I'd rather do these other things. And we're seeing that all over the place, right? You can probably go through your Facebook feed and you could identify where people are. Like, right. Oh, you might be in fight right now. Oh, you might be in numb right now, right?
Totally.
And so I think the first step, just like we would tell our kids, is some of that self-regulation stuff. That we aren't going to just jump from numb to feeling. Like, we might need to take a step back and do some really practical physical things. We might need to get outside and put our feet in the grass. If you're somewhere that you can do that, do some grounding work, barefoot in the grass for a couple of minutes. You might need to do some deep breathing. I don't know if anybody's read the book, The Deepest Well by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She's brilliant. One of the best books on childhood trauma I've ever read. But she talks about how 2 minutes of deep breathing can reset your central nervous system. So perhaps it's time to turn off all the noise and breathe for 2 minutes. I like the fact that she says 2 minutes, because a lot of times that's all I have, right? Like, I can hide in my closet and it might take them 2 minutes to find me. I could maybe run an errand and stay in my car for 2 minutes when I get to a parking lot, and I can actually do that. And so maybe you need 2 minutes of deep breathing, and maybe you need that multiple times. Maybe you need to get outside and you need to do some cross body stimulation. You need to run, walk, hike, do yoga, whatever it is, so that you can give yourself permission to go there. And in fact, when I do workshops, a lot of times we'll write ourselves permission slips that are like, okay, I am giving myself permission to feel. And it's going to be uncomfortable. In fact, I'm reading the book, Waking Up White, I said earlier, and she talked about the presence of tolerance and how we always talk about tolerance. And she said, what I feel like the tolerance is for uncomfortable feelings, uncomfortable emotions. That I don't want to tolerate others. I want to celebrate others. But I need to craft in myself a willingness to tolerate the uncomfortability that comes with all of this. The not having the answers, the fear, the sadness, the grief, that I think a lot of times what is keeping us from asking ourselves how we really are is we're afraid of the answer.
For sure.
Right? Like when people are like, so how are you really doing? And you're like, I don't know. I haven't asked because I'm afraid of what I'm going to hear.
And we're afraid is somebody going to listen? Is there going to be someone? Is this person safe? Can I tell them, and will they be able to tolerate my pain?
Yeah.
Or will they shut me out or shut me down because they can't tolerate it either?
Right. And can we tolerate our own pain? Right. Are we that unsafe person?
Right.
Sometimes I'll be with really safe friends and I'm the one who's unsafe for myself.
What do you mean?
Well, I feel like I have a lot of messages. I just read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and she doesn't come from a maybe a conservative background right now, and so you might not agree with everything if you choose to read it, but she has a lot of brilliance in there. And one of the things she talks about is the memos we've written and received.
Mm.
And so I talk about this a lot when we're talking about healing prayer, like the lies that we've believed.
Mm-hmm.
And even the book I'm reading right now, when we're talking about culture, like what are the cultural messages? Is it that sadness needs to be put away? And so I'm not allowed to feel sad. What if it's that, and I think we get these messages sometimes from other people, as an adoptive parent, you're not allowed to be overwhelmed. You signed up for this after all.
Oh yeah, heard that.
Told that to myself, right? Yeah. What if it's like, but you have to choose contentment. So you can't listen to longing in your soul. You can't listen to grief, because I mean, we see it played out in Easter weekends, right? Like we go straight from Good Friday to like, don't worry, Sunday's coming. And we want to gloss right over Saturday when everybody was filled with despair and what's going on and he's dead. We don't want that part. And so we've created these kind of messages that we live around. One of mine is, you can't be weak. You need to be strong. You have to be the strong one or the good one or the whatever it is. And so if we haven't gone through these messages, they are dictating our lives. That's why I loved how Glennon was talking about it, because she said, I need to burn these memos and write some new ones that are full of actual truth.
Right.
Because the truth is not, the Lord has never asked us to be perfect. He's never asked, like, you're not allowed to have feelings. Where did we get that memo? And there is some work to be done to figure out where we got the memos. But there's also some work to be done about, like, you know what? I'm not going to live with those. And so I can listen. And the Lord's going to be with me right there when we hear it. Mm-hmm. And then we move to the next part, okay, right? So that's where everybody else is right now, right? Oh, now I'm feeling it all. I oftentimes have friends who sign up for therapy and then they message me later and they're like, well, now I hate you. Like,
right?
I mean, that's fair.
Hard work.
It is hard work.
And it's not like you can leave with everything tied in a nice bow and exit the office and compartmentalize. I mean, maybe some people can, but I think the majority of people, whether you're in a therapy office or in your bathroom, you know, giving yourself some space for this work, it doesn't just stay compartmentalized. And I think that's what can be so challenging. And then we have to face the day and not get triggered. Right. Which is, I mean, oftentimes it's impossible, right? Like our lives are not an episode of Full House. I really wish they were. Like at the end, and then we all hug, and yay, it's dealt with. And that's not how it works. And we've got to start being a people who are okay with that. Right. That my favorite story in the Bible is Lazarus, because like Jesus shows up, Lazarus is dead, the girls are ticked, and what does Jesus do? He goes to the tomb and he weeps. Right. Knowing full well he's going to bring about resurrection. Knowing full well, like the party is about to begin, but this is not the time to party. This is the time to listen. This is the time to grieve. And he grieved with them. And how
often do I not give myself that voice to do, whether it's right now when, I mean, obviously this could for sure be, it's just applicable right now everywhere, right? Like listen and grieve is really what so many people are asking all over the place. And we are going to have to, especially as the church, not run too quick. Well, don't worry, resurrection's coming. It's all over now. Yay, see, we saw it.
Right.
Because that's not how it's going to work. It's going to take some grief. And so if you are in grief, be sad, cry, weep, wail. You are experiencing a part of the heart of God when you mourn with those who mourn, including yourself. And so when we take time to sit and be like, how am I actually doing? Like, what am I feeling? Which a lot of times we don't feel like we even have time for, right? Where, especially when we're doing it so much with our kids. What are you feeling? How are you doing? Let me like help everybody else. But when we do take that time to go, how am I doing? Then maybe we'll identify, maybe I'm scared. Maybe I'm hurting. Maybe I'm ashamed. You said earlier that repentance is one of the things that needs to come in this season. And to just allow ourselves to stay with that, because then resurrection comes. And for too long as a church, we've been at the tomb knowing that that's where resurrection happens, but we're like plugging in essential oils. Like, oh, don't worry, it doesn't smell down here. I've got a little purification we can put right here. Or we're hanging up streamers. Like, this is where the party has begun. And while that is true, that's where resurrection happens, it's at the tomb, it's also really hard. And tombs are smelly, I'm assuming, and full of despair. And it's here where we wrestle with Jesus and we don't numb to that pain, whether it is pain that sometimes we're going to get triggered, and this pain has nothing to do with what's happening right now. It's like our childhood stuff that's coming back up.
Right.
Or it might be exactly what's happening right now, whatever that pain is, to sit there with the Lord and then ask for real healing. And then next step, that's when we get to see the dead brought to life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you guys, but okay, so the first miracle, the turning water into wine, I kind of want to be there because that sounds like a really great party. I am in for that party. But if I had to pick a miracle to be at when Jesus was here on earth, I would pick Lazarus. Because what is better than seeing the dead brought to life? But the deal is, if I want to see Lazarus-style miracles, I'm going to have to hang out at the tomb. And that is true for me if I want to see resurrection, if I want to see new hope, if I want to see beauty coming from ashes, if I want to see the oil of joy instead of mourning, I'm going to have to go to my own tomb places. And it's true for our world. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I wonder if what we're seeing right now is not the world falling apart, but the world recognizing that we're in a tomb space. And maybe this is just where we need to be to see resurrection. Maybe new life is what comes on the other side of this. If we do the hard work, if we don't hang up the streamers, and if we don't ditch the tomb and say like, oh, never mind, we're going to just pretend that didn't happen. We're going to put Band-Aids. If we don't do that and we stay at the tomb, we're going to see resurrection.
Yeah, when you're saying all that, it just like, one kind of sentence just jumps out at me in saying like, yeah, you can't fix something if you don't even admit it's broken. That we need to start, like you're saying, in that brokenness, no matter how scary that is, and examining even that, like, why is it scary? Is it a place that we feel weak? But Yeah, and it takes and it takes a long time. Like, yes, it's hard work. Healing is hard work.
Yeah, and it takes that examination of like, why don't I want to go here? And whether that is big things like racial inequality, right? We see people defending that a lot, and maybe it's not so much a big issue, right? We have to ask, like, why am I reluctant to hear this pain? Why am I reluctant to see this lived experience for others? And I need to do that with my own self. Why am I reluctant to know that I feel weak? Why am I reluctant to admit that I lost my cool on my kids today? Why do I feel like I have to have it all together? Where do we ever get that message? Because that's not Jesus. Jesus is like, yeah, I know everything is crazy. I know the mess.
Right.
And it is here that I love you. We see that with our kids sometimes, right? When they try to just like perform and be like, no, never mind, nothing's wrong. And yet we see under their eyes that something's wrong. You don't have to pretend anymore. And I wonder if this is a season, and you guys, you need to know, I do not have answers, right? I am not a map maker. I am a traveler, and I am deep in this right now. Somebody texted me yesterday and said, how do I take care of myself in this when I feel like I'm drowning? And I was like, I would tell you if I didn't feel like I was drowning. that I don't have answers, but I wonder if the unbecoming is where the good stuff is. If saying I don't know, or I didn't know this was your experience and I'm sorry. And offering that grace to others and that grace to ourselves. Right? I love that what Max said is the message he got is like, I'm in trouble and I'm a bad boy, right? Like you can't be in trouble because you're not allowed to be bad. And I wonder if that's what the Lord wants to look at us and be like, yeah, there's a mess here. And yeah, you probably had a part in it. And you are loved. That's why in Uganda, our kind of mantra is you are loved and you are worth loving. Because I think for a long time I thought like, God loves me, but also kind of thinks I'm a piece of crap.
Right. He loves you because he has to, not because he wants to.
Oh, for sure. Like,
right.
He loves me because he's God, and good thing, because
yes,
ain't nothing lovable about this. And yet I think when I was in therapy and doing all that belovedness work, I felt like the Lord was saying to me, like, I love you because you are made in my image. And I think you are worth loving. No matter what I feel, no matter if I am terrified, no matter if I've made a mess of things, here he meets me in the grief, in the longing, in the I don't know what to do next. And then he leads me. And that's where healing happens.
I think, for me, one of the best things has been to join a community of other people. I was in, Bible study for years, and that being able to be transparent with other women was, helped me grow as a Christian. And being in a support group now for trauma-informed parents has done the same thing. And the most, some of the most beautiful things are seeing people be able to admit their weaknesses, and that, they blew it and they yelled at their kid, and be sorry and remorseful, and be able to be uplifted at the same time by the community. I love the idea that you're saying of admitting that you're broken and being able to have a safe place for that. And I feel like our support group is a place, and I just heard it even today, that where we're heard, where we can have a voice. We don't always have a voice in our family, and sometimes maybe we don't even feel like it with our children, but finding a way where you have that community, finding a safe place, maybe it's a girlfriend, a therapist, a support group, where you can share your voice to someone who's willing to listen and just, like you said, just be sad with you and travel on whatever journey it is. They're willing to go with you and they're willing to speak life into you. I think that's so important, to not be isolated in your own healing.
Oh, I think so too. I think that we need those friendships. And there's a very real reason that the story of Hagar was included in the Bible. And that here this African woman who had the baby of her master and then been sent away. And that is where she meets the Lord. And then names him El Roy, the God who sees me. And, you know, I think we kind of planned maybe on coming on here and having like practical tips for how you can do soul care.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Right. Yeah, so if that's what you were looking for, sorry, you guys. We have failed you.
We had to do a detour.
Yeah. But in the end, I feel like what we need more than anything is to be seen. That we need to be seen. We need to allow ourselves to see ourselves. And then allow the Lord to see us and others. That one of my favorite spaces in the world right now is a Marco Polo I have with 3 other adoptive moms. They have all adopted from different parts of Africa, each one of us. And we do Marco Polo, which is like this video app, and to be like, today's hard. Today, here's what I'm processing. And to have that space where somebody says, yes, you're overwhelmed, because overwhelming things are happening. So my favorite words to use with people are the words, of course. So when somebody says they're tired, that you go, of course you're tired. You've had a really long week. Of course you're sad. Sad things are happening. Of course you're scared. Scary things are happening, because I think we feel so much shame that we might feel sad or scared or whatever it is. And we think people are just going to tell us to get in line. That for somebody to say like, yeah, that makes sense. That's a human response. And I don't know about you guys, but for some reason I got the message that I wasn't supposed to be human.
Right.
Like ridiculous, right? That I was supposed to be super mom and super Christian. And I was a single mom with 3 kids for 10 years. I just got married last year, but I thought I was supposed to be able to do it all. And that if I didn't, I was making Jesus sad. And I needed to be a good girl for the world and for Jesus. And it's when I realized that he's okay with my mess. And it's right there that I met. I see that Dave and Marcia asked, can you tell a story about this process and a specific experience in your life? I'm trying to think of a specific experience other than this week, which I feel like this week I'm having to do these principles. I am having to, when life feels overwhelming, and we have a situation right now that one of my kids is now with us full time instead of going back and forth with their dad. And so there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Between quarantine and things going on at home and now what's going on in the world. And my tendency is to take care of everybody else. If you guys have done Enneagram study, I'm a 2. I know that's shocking. I'm a 2 with a 3 wing. So I need to be good and helpful, and I need to get it all done. And we've done like a million projects during quarantine. So I do have a lot of things to get done. And in the process, I want to ignore my own soul, because I just don't have time for that, right? Like I've got time to deal with everybody else. I can be like super intentional, trauma-informed mom and new wife and run a nonprofit, and I'm having a hard time. And so one of the things I realized when I was talking to a friend of mine is I had to make it 1 hour a day mine to go on a run. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that. Some of you might not have an hour a day, but I needed to go on a walk because I needed to get outside. So I needed to do some self-regulation. I needed to be outside in the sunshine. I needed to be doing cross-body stimulation, so I'm running. I needed to get up my heart rate for a specific amount of time. And I needed to be alone with my own thoughts. And it's there every single time that I found myself crying. Because I finally gave myself the space. And I gave myself permission to feel. And what does that look like? For me, it looks like this. I'm going to admit that this is really scary. It's a scary time. I'm going to admit that I've got some grief. One of my friends is a trauma therapist, and she recommended to a friend of mine who's a nonprofit leader in El Salvador to spend 15 minutes every day grieving whatever you have heard that day. And I believe that grief is, the Bible says that like God has set eternity in the hearts of man. We've talked about that being like, we know that heaven is real. That's how I grew up thinking it meant. Like I could talk to people and they would know that we're meant for eternity. And what I'm wondering is if it meant like heaven was in our hearts. So we knew that this wasn't how it should be. We knew that there's supposed to be no more tears and no more sorrow and no more pain. And so when we grieve, we are agreeing with God that there is brokenness. We're not acting like it's all okay. And so now I let myself on those runs in a very practical way be like, yeah, it is messed up. We're in the middle of the ruins. And it is here where I have to meet the Lord. I have to say, okay, now what? Like, first of all, in my own life, what do I do with my grief? And what are my next steps? How do I take care of myself? How do I get regulated so that I can be a good mom and intentional? And it might be like, what's my own stuff I need to apologize for? What did I do when I was dysregulated? A lot of the time right now. What do I need to go home and apologize to my husband for, or my kids? What are my next steps? And then right now I'm listening to an audiobook. So I'm listening to Waking Up White, and I'm dismantling like white privilege and white supremacy. And so very real steps, because it can't stop with grief, right? Like there was more to the story always. And even with Lazarus, like Jesus stood there and what did he say? He said, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus had to stand up and come out. And so then the Lord is so faithful to not leave us in the grief. I think a lot of times we're afraid to grieve because we're like, if I start crying now, I'm just never going to stop. But the truth, like guys, that doesn't happen, right? Even when I'm like full on suck the rug crying, like when you're just face on the ground and you're like breathing in the carpet, wishing you had vacuumed more, all of that. Even when I'm in that space, it does eventually subside. And I go to now what do I do? What do I do to seek beauty in this world? I have a tattoo of an ampersand. And that's because I believe that everything is both and. That almost every situation, there's grief and gratitude. And they're not answers to one another. They're not anecdotes. It's not like, well, I'm grieving, so I better get quick over to the gratitude part so I don't have to feel anymore. But it allows me to balance it out so that I can feel it all and so that I can see the Lord's presence in all of it. So I hope that was helpful, Save and Marcia, about how I kind of walked that out.
Well, I love how you ended that. I mean, it's the perfect segue for me. Our pastor's wife has a book called Choose Joy. And when she talks about life is like a railroad track. And it's not that like it's either all this way or it's either all that way. So it's either all sorrow or it's all joy. Like you have to choose. But she says, no, like when you are on this track, whatever that track is, that you can choose joy, that joy is there and joy is available to you. And I love that. So I just love that, you know, that was something that you brought to light. And I appreciate all that you have had to say, and just being willing to continue the conversation of brokenness and grieving, and that even within that there's hope and joy and healing and beauty. And I so appreciate that. I am going to segue because we need to for sake of time. And it's just not me and you on a phone call that can go on and on, which I do wish sometime we can do that.
We could do it for a really long time.
I know. I agree. So I'm going to ask you, I always end with 3 questions for my guests. And the first one is, what brings you joy?
For me right now, it is nature. So being outside and realizing I live in Colorado, so that's great because there's really big mountains and I have lilacs right now in my backyard that are blooming. And to remember that he's always crafting something beautiful. So I can look at those mountains and go, okay, you made that, you can handle this as I look at Pikes Peak. And so that really brings me joy. That and my kid dancing. I posted on Instagram last night. We were talking about it before, but we like to do after dinner dance parties. And my librarian has some moves, and it makes me laugh hysterically, and I need that, especially right now.
You'd love, I have a sign in my kitchen that said, "This kitchen is made for dancing."
Yes.
And it so much fits more my personality than cooking. It's about like, let's have the dance party in the kitchen.
I'm not particularly good at either of those things, but I'm definitely in.
Yes, me neither.
Yeah.
I'm not a dancer, but I'm a mover. It feels good.
And if I get to embarrass my kids in the process, all the better.
It's all about the fun.
Right.
All right. I love it. And I'm a nature girl too. That brings me joy too. If you could say one thing to your younger self when you first started this adoption journey, what would it be?
Today's a weird day to ask that question because I feel like this week it's dismantle your white privilege and white supremacy and understand some of that white saviorism that is coming in.
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question tonight, right?
It is a little bit of a loaded question, and I do think that would be part of it, is go through and figure out why do I do the things I do? Why do I believe the things I do? What comes from culture? What doesn't come from culture? That, and go to therapy earlier.
Yep. Thank you.
That's what I tell everyone. I'm like a therapy Nazi. Like, everyone should be a therapist.
Well, it's interesting. So I do these, you're my 11th guest, and I'm pretty sure almost everybody, if not 10 out of the 11, have said that, they've gone to therapy, and therapy is so helpful. And I just love when people share about that, because I think that there has been a stigma about going to therapy. And I think it's great and it's healing, and nobody should feel awkward about that or admitting it. So I just love that you say that. I need to throw that in when you talk about that.
We've got to do the work. And so if I'm going to lead in the work, it has to start. I keep saying that it has to begin in me.
Yeah.
Whether that is the work of anti-racism, or that is the work of healing and leading a kiddo to healing, or if that is the work of long-term sustainability and deep healing that we talk about in Uganda. Like, it has to begin in me. May it begin, and may it begin in me.
Yep. And sometimes we need someone to help us lead the way, right?
Usually.
Right. All right. My last question for you is, what foster adoption myth would you just like to blow up right now?
That we have to be perfect. That we're not allowed to struggle. Obviously, I struggle a lot with my AirPods. That it's supposed to be easy. That we're going to a party and sometimes it's hard, because sometimes life is hard. But if you want to see Lazarus-style miracles, you gotta go hang out at the tomb together. Right. And then that's where we get to see the dead brought to life. And I think also the idea that we're doing this for somebody else. Like, in Uganda, we talk about mutually transformative relationships, because my life has changed as much as the moms in Uganda, and we learn from each other. And I think we need to remember that in adoption and foster care and everything else, that all of it is for both of us. God's going to heal and redeem and restore me as much in this process as anyone else.
Well, Brandi, thank you so much. Max is going to put the links to your organizations, beautyforashesworldwide.org. If people want to continue this conversation with you, your Facebook page, Beauty for Ashes Uganda, those are two great ways they can connect with you and just continue this conversation, or get involved with either one of those that they're doing. I just want to let everybody know who the next upcoming guests are. We have on June 9th, we have Rachel Robert. She is a clinical psychologist and sibling of 3 adopted kiddos. And some of you may know her. She is Elizabeth Steiffe's daughter, one of the 7. So she's going to join our conversation. And then on the 16th, we have Jason Weber. And he is the National Director of Foster Care from Christian Alliance for Orphans. And he'll be talking to us about getting help from the community. And he's also a foster adopt parent. So stick around for the after party from 5:30 to 6, where we'll just continue to have a conversation with whatever you want to talk about, whether it's something you just heard or you want to talk about your week, you want to get prayer, whatever it is, you just want to join that community. And so thank you, Brandi. I just want to say thank you for joining the Replenish conversation. We appreciate your time and value your contribution. And thank you all who called in this week to this week's Replenish Zoom. I pray that you who are struggling during this time, that you feel replenished and receive some help to sustain you. Don't forget to join our private Facebook group, Safe, Precious, and Heard, to continue in the community. And we have a weekly support groups ongoing. Feel free to reach out and connect with us and join one of those. And remember that there's no such thing as a perfect parent, only a growing parent. So give yourself the grace you need.